I have the great pleasure now to introduce Ravi Gopan and Graham Shirville to talk about their exploits in North America with QO100.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I must not stand in front of the projector. Good morning. This is one of my photographs. I'm quite proud of this photograph. Everybody's heard of Signal Hill in Newfoundland? Yeah, where the signals, Marconi was listening, I think he was at this end, Marconi was listening to signals from Poldhu in Cornwall, which was the first time that the transatlantic had ever been crossed with RF. I think the tower there was built after he did it. I don't think it was that old. Anyway, that's a famous place, and you'll see more of it later. And David and myself, MRF and myself, were located just there. The house that you'll see more of was just there. So we weren't far away. When we arrived, though, we could never see the top of the hill because it was covered in fog. So that's a bit of location information. Take us back 2 years, precisely 2 years, I think, in this very room, when AMSAT-UK announced a challenge for QO100 operation in North America. We described in great detail how the footprint of QO100 is there, and that I think that white blip there is Newfoundland, or it may be the yellow bit, but it's about 50 miles away. And we said, well, microwaves can bounce and refract and whatever, so it must be possible, mustn't it? Go and do it, and we'll give a prize for the first person that does it, and TV and the rest. So that's where it all started 2 years ago, and then it all went fairly quiet. And then we discovered that people on the east were operating satellites, operating through QO100 at below the nominal theoretical footprint. So that was the status up to the beginning of this year. And nothing had really happened in terms of Newfoundland, which is approximately 0.9 degrees below the QO100 horizon. So that's why we thought it was possible. So actually what happened, completely coincidentally, not organised at all, it turned out that there were sort of three groups who ended up going to Newfoundland in the same week, actually 10 days, I think. First was Gopan, who is here, and he went out, and we'll hear from him in a moment. Also, a couple of Canadians, Stefan and John. Stefan flew from Toronto, Winnipeg, and John drove from not quite so far away, but he drove a very long way with a big dish on the back of his car, back of his bakkie. David and Graham chose the easy route. We discovered at the beginning of the year that WestJet suddenly started to fly direct from Gatwick to St John's, Newfoundland. It was a new flight. It worked very well. It was about 5 hours out and 4.75 hours back. Terribly easy. 737, nothing fantastic about it. And that's actually what made us do it, I think, because the thought of transporting ourselves and a whole load of kit via Toronto or Halifax and it getting lost and whatever didn't seem very attractive. But being able to fly direct made it possible. And there was also, which I certainly didn't know, a Dutch group had built a beacon and sent it over to another Graham, VO1DZ, and this beacon had sat in his station for a couple of years, unused, unfortunately, until we came out. So it would have been really good if he had been able to use it before, because we would have known an awful lot more than we did when we set off. So that's the background. We can talk about where it all started, the unknowns, the location, preparation. Yes, I think we'll talk through that. Contacts and some pretty pictures of St John's. So, that's where it all started, the QO100. That's me, actually. Sorry, I just realised that's me in this room talking about it 2 years ago. So There we are. There were the unknowns that we put up at that point. Would a normal QO100 station be sufficient? Could activity include DATV? Well, the answer is it could if you stayed there long enough, unfortunately, and it will come back to that. As signals from the ground station will be relying on tropo ducting. Should you be on the beach, well, or higher up, or right at the top? I think we concluded. David, what did we conclude? The answer is yes, anywhere, really. Certainly we found signals strong on the top of Signal Hill once. They were strong for you on the beach, near enough the beach. Gopan, you were how high above the seawater level? 10 metres? Yeah, 10 metres. And the Canadians were about the same. Yeah, we're on the low cliff. So they were probably, we didn't do any analysis, but probably it worked better in different locations at different times, maybe. And what time of year? Well, you certainly don't want to go there before May because it's quite cold, wet, windy, foggy in May, so it's only going to be worse earlier on. Don't know what it's like at this time of year, and I would say August would be a much better bet. And the last comment about the actual footprint, well, the creator of the footprint is sitting over there, so I will not comment about its accuracy, but I gather it's based on the theoretical footprint from that height and does take into account the oblateness of the Earth, but not much else. Is that a fair summary? Okay, good. Thank you, Phil. So the location of Gopan. That's Gopan. May I introduce Gopan M0XUU?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Morning, everyone. Name is Gopan, call sign M0XUU. I've got an Indian call, Victor Uniform 3 Hotel Papa Foxtrot. So as Graham just gave you an overview, the idea started after seeing the 2022 challenge from Graham. But at that point in time, I was not thinking that I'll be going, but eventually it started. The idea came in towards the end of last year. Luckily, around the same time, my partner was also looking for a trip somewhere. So I somehow managed to get it to St. John's because there were quite a few trails that you can go around, walk. I know May was a bit early, but we still booked everything for May. From June, the prices are quite high compared to May, and that's the only reason why I've booked it in May. So we picked up a location on the southern side called Petty Harbour. Luckily, on Airbnb, we found a beautiful location. So that's the location which we choose. They had a patio outside, which was quite useful to set up the dish and other things. And it was right on the sea. That's a view from the road, looking to the place where we were staying. And this was slightly more. The elevation was -1 at that point compared to Signal Hill. That's a view from the road onto the horizon. And it's a small town, a village, where you can see boats going in and out of the harbor. And it was quiet at that time. We didn't have much of a noise or any other issues. So in terms of preparation, I was active on QO100 since I think June 2020. So I had all the setup which I was planning to carry. The main concern was on the dish. because I remember back in December 23, there was a station from Brazil went to Uruguay, and he was using an 60 centimeter dish and was talking about deep QSBs and fading and things like that. So I thought if I go with a 60 centimeter dish, I might still face it. So I want to have something which is slightly larger. So went with an 85 centimeter, and I also had a backup in St. John's through Graham, Victor Oscar 1 DZ, 1 meter dish, which eventually I didn't have to use it. So in order for me to pack this 80 centimeter dish, I had to cut it into two and then pack it on a IKEA case, cardboard case. Physically, the stability was there, so I didn't have any issues with retaining the shape of the dish. So that's the entire setup which I took. So you've got the two amplifiers. It's a 10-watt amplifier. That's a homebrewed transverter, which is a mix of up converter from DX Petrol and they're designed by David G0MRF, the down converter. On to the right is a Pluto SDR. As a backup, and then bits and buffs. So I've got everything is GPS controlled, a helical feed with modified LNB. So that's the setup which I've used. I didn't have to use the Pluto SDR at St. John's. All the QSOs, everything was done on the analog transverter. That's all packed. So next I think we reached there around lunchtime on 8th. It was gray, overcast, raining. We got to the location just after 4 o'clock, I think. And that's a view the very next day. So I've managed to set up the dish and everything overnight, but didn't manage to get any signal at that time. So the very next day, you can still see the clouds, and there was no signal until around 7, 8 o'clock. I could listen to a nearby satellite because when I flew from here, I was planning to track a satellite which is nearby so that I can get close enough to QO100, the horizon, and then change the elevation. So I was able to receive that station here, and that was the initial setup. So they had some garden tool bench, which was a bit elevated. So I managed to get the dish on top of it, which means it had a clear view to the horizon. So that's just a receive setup. At around 9:30 local time, that's when I was still trying to see whether I can get hold of that beacon, the lower beacon. That's when on the waterfall, I started seeing a faint line. So after fine tuning, we started receiving the lower beacon. I don't know if I can play. It's a video. Oh, just click it. That's a very first signal received at St. John's. So this is really happy at that point. At least I received, but I was too happy that by that time Graham and Frank, they came up with the 2.4 gigahertz beacon to my location, and then we started setting up that beacon to see whether that's still working or not. So we switched on the beacon for some time, and then after lunch we went out thinking that the satellite is there. I've managed to receive some signals. I should be able to work more stations in the evening and maybe work a pile up in the night. Got back around 5:30 and there were no signals. So I thought it was just because the deep QSP or fading effect. I waited and then I called David, tried to figure out what's happening. Because at that time, there was no clouds, it was sunny, everything was perfect, but still there was no signal. So David told me that it could be something right at the horizon, which is blocking the whole thing. And or it could be the movement of the satellite itself. So we said, we'll try again next day. Unfortunately, I've planned for a trip the next day. So I knew that after half six, I won't be there until late evening. Till around 5:30, there was no signal. It's completely empty. And we went out for the whole day, came back around 7 o'clock, and that's the day when we had the strong auroras with rain and sleet. So no chance, there was no chance that I'll be able to work any station. So come Saturday, I know that I had only 2 more days to have the contact. So Saturday was the make or break day for me. So that's that evening, I think, on Friday. Oh, and that's the maximum which I've received, 20.8 above SNR with my dish. You'll later on see that the bigger dish from John and Stefan, they managed to get up to 33 something. So that's a view from below of the 2 dishes. So that's the beacon, which we ran it for some time and then I had to switch it off. And the other one was the dish which I've used. That's the evening on Friday. Again, yes, driving back to the location. That's actually sleet on Saturday, on Friday evening. Okay, so so on Saturday, although there was a plan to go out and meet the local hands who are meeting at one of the shopping centers, but I decided to stay back and give it a try. I knew that with my testing, the signals were really weak uplink from my end. So obviously I started with FT8. I was on phone with David and also with Nina. So we were trying, and I've asked David to give a CQ call because I know if you start, if I start calling CQ on 540, there will be a big mess. So we decided we'll move up, we get a clear spot, and David started calling CQ. You can see the amount of try we had to do before we get to the final one, which is the Roger 73. So that was the first contact, and then slowly started picking up. So that's the setup. That's with the weather protection and all. I guess this is a video. Oh, it's playing. Okay. Yeah, I've muted the audio because it was the excitement I didn't want to share. Yeah, so that's going on, and you can see me on phone with David. So later that night, we've moved on to CW, and this is again from. Oops. So most of the contacts were, I had to go really slow because of my signal strength. It was really weak. So I think we worked almost 140 stations on CW, and then quite a few on FT8 as well. So the interesting thing was, at one point you'll have your entire spectrum filled up with stations calling you, and in like five minutes it'll be empty. There'll be absolutely nothing. So it was giving you a feeling like working on an HF band where you have deep QSPs, but so yeah, so that's the certificate from AMSAT, and that's Graham on the left. Next to Graham is John, V3 CMJ, I think, yeah, and Stefan, V4 Sierra Whiskey. So that's the QSL card which I've entered. I guess that's pretty much, and some shots from St. John's. It's a lovely place to visit. A bit expensive after May. Yes, yes. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so carrying on. That was where the Canadians were. Gopan, where was that in relation to you? Were you further? You were up here slightly, were you? Oh, were they? Okay, there. Fine. So a bit further south than we were. Not that was terribly. And that was their view from their car park, V4 SW. They obviously took that when the fog wasn't in, but most of the time they were like that, certainly when David and I went over to see them one afternoon or morning maybe. And John had driven this vehicle, I don't know what you call it, backy, but not with the dish fully erected. Apparently they took it half to bits and then put the other half together on site every time. But a fairly difficult task they'd set themselves, and particularly when you can't see where it's pointing. But they got very good signals for some periods of time. But their operating conditions were not what I would call ideal. We chose the easier route. As I mentioned earlier, the on the map on the left here, Signal Hill is up at the top there, and Fort Amherst is down here, the other side of the entrance. That's the main shipping entrance into St. John's Harbour, and we were located just there. We were at the junior assistant lighthouse keeper's cottage, because that was chosen to be the one right on the edge, and like Gopan, we had a balcony as well. It was all carefully selected, carefully thought through. This it wasn't just thrown together at the last minute. So that's another shot of the sort of entrance. Apparently, sometimes of the year when you look out, you actually end up looking out at icebergs floating by. So a bit of preparation photographs. Like Gopan, we were worried about dishes and size of dishes and how big a dish you could get in the aircraft. I ended up, David and I took two completely separate sets of kit. David was primarily for FT8 and CW intended. Mine was intended for SSB and DATV. So there are various bits lying around here. I was trying to prove when this photograph was taken that with this dish, a 65 centimetre dish, I could actually receive the DATV beacon, which I could prove I did, but we were also playing around with transmitting via it, and that's the PA, the 200 watt PA there, and there are various bits of stuff all over the floor and chairs. And anyway, it was a nice sunny day. And another experiment that David and I did was to go off onto Dunstable Downs and see what beacons we could hear on 10 gig. Excuse me. Also, the intent there was to prove to ourselves that the dishes were actually pointing at the horizon, because obviously with the offset dishes you need to get them angled quite a long way down. You can see David's one there in the background, and you'd increase the projection off the pole, I think, and I'd done something similar on mine, drilling holes in the bracketry to get the down angle. And we did quite well up there. We heard a beacon over in the south, near the south coast. I can't remember where it was. I was very suspicious that we'd never hear it, but we did. Happiness there. Oh, sorry, pushing bother. Yes, departure pictures look very similar, don't they? My one there. So I actually took 2 sets of kit in the luggage hold on the aircraft. The big kit with the aerial, mine was not cut in half, but you can't really make it out there. But there was carry-on baggage there, and I had I don't know, those of you who were here last year, over in the back corner, I had a demo station of QO100 with a small dish and a laptop and a box with a Pluto in it, and a PA, and that's what I took, is hand baggage, and a toothbrush, of course, but that was the equipment. Oh, and a 99 watt lithium battery. So I was working on the worst case, you know, sort of backup redundancy, that if the baggage went missing, there wasn't another flight from Gatwick for 4 days. That was the flight we were going to go home on. So if we needed something that wasn't going to go missing. In the end, nothing went missing, but that was the plan. So yes, pictures of the assistant lighthouse keeper's cottage. You can see David's dishes there. You cut yours in half as well. Sorry. And that was joined together. That worked well. And my one, I think you see a bit later on. That's another picture of David's dish in the more normal weather. I realised actually afterwards, going through these photographs, that the Canadian flag is either blowing that way or it's blowing that way. And I think when conditions are good, it was blowing the other way, and when it was blowing this way, we got a sort of signal. That's my theory. So yeah, we had a selection of dishes. David's one's down there. Not pointed to it. David went there on the balcony. The 1 metre dish that the Canadians had got for their beacon was sort of round the back. I just stuck my dish out the window on a small pole, which I brought with me, and that's the dish that you saw last year, the one that I hand carried, which was just on a sucker on the window, and yeah, it worked. Well, anyway. Yeah, there we are. So that's sort of the view out. Misty, cold. Oh, and the foghorn. Yes. I found sleeping with that foghorn going quite difficult. For some reason, I let David have the bedroom round the back. I don't know why I was so generous. But anyway. I think actually what woke me up on our last morning at about 5 o'clock. Excuse me. I woke up at about 5 o'clock and I don't know why. I think it was because the foghorn had stopped, because the mist, the fog had lifted, and that was when conditions were really, really good, just before we were leaving. Canadian beer, whatever. That was a picture of David's equipment with a very attractive looking Morse key. Did you actually use it, David? Once, okay, good. And we've heard Gopan talking about how weak the signals can be until the very last day when the band really opened up. Evidence of a weak signal in a waterfall, we've seen those before. I have to say, credit please to Simon G4ELI for his SDR console software. I found it easy to use, very convenient. You could leave the transmitter running and just in a quiet shack, all you did was talk to people and tune the band 10 kilohertz up and tune across. It didn't require push to talk or box or anything. It was very easy and very enjoyable. Yes, that's what the band looked like on some occasions when it was busy. I say the band, QO100 looked like. Situation photographs. My shack was on the left there. Again. That goes back, doesn't it? Yeah, okay. So my shack was over there, and David's shack was there, and the fridge was just there. All that mattered, really. I think David must have taken that when I was really busy and trying to concentrate on quite a few signals there. This is a signal I've received.
Yeah, 57 QSB is saying that you disappeared completely there. GATVR, you're I'll give you 57 now. 57 on peak. So, okay, Ron, over.
I'll give credit to SV8.
You're in QRT in 14 minutes, I'm afraid. VO1 of G3VZV, QRZ.
Thank you to SV8DH, I believe DH7 for sending me that video. Here's another one without audio, apparently. Bit weird. But you can see my signal there, or our signal, and then suddenly the band lights up. Not sure why there's no audio on that. Because I was very loud, and I apologise. At one point we were hitting Lila, which is a cardinal sin, those of you who don't know QO100. If you activate Lila, your signal is over strength, and would you please turn it down? Yeah, so that's the beacon created by P1CMO and his group, which we tested and worked very well. We also went and did some socialising in bars and in McDonald's with some of the locals. They were very, very welcoming. The morning meeting, coffee morning, it's like the East Anglia group, isn't it? So 10:30 on a Friday, was it, I think? Something like that. David wanted to take me to show me the low life of. Not sure it was quite at that angle. The angle is very jaunty. I think the wall is vertical. So the Saturday came. We arrived on Wednesday night. We operated Thursday and Friday. Saturday came. Our flight was not till late on Saturday. We had some things to do, and we had to be out of the house by 11 o'clock on Saturday, which was an error. We should have had another day there. So when we were operating on Saturday morning, I'd woken up at 5 o'clock, switched on the radio, the band was full. I went and knocked up David and said, get up, get up, get up, get up. Don't worry about getting dressed, get up. And then we were panicking about getting everything de-rigged and off-site by, I think it was 11 o'clock. So that was why we were a bit distracted, and again, why I apologise why I never got the DATV kit from over there to over there and rigged it up. However, that morning the fog disappeared magically, and this is a photograph taken from very close to where you saw the first photograph of Signal Hill. This is the car park at the top of Signal Hill, or very close to the top, and out there is the North Atlantic, and the clouds are rolling away. So I'm not quite sure why. I think it was David's idea. Said, well, why don't we try from up here? Because we've got a couple of hours to kill before I had an appointment in the afternoon. And I got my portable kit in my handbag, hand case. So I said, all right. So we tried it from just on the roof of the car and didn't really get anywhere, and everything was floating around a bit. So again, I think it was David who suggested, well, look, that's that wall there where those people are walking, and the dustbin is. Why don't we just go and set it up on the wall? Okay. So there's that dish on a plate, an aluminium plate, so it could stick on it, gives it a bit of a footing. There is the transceiver, whatever you want to call it, the Pluto, the PA, an MRF driver, down a bias T. It's got something else in it. Can't think what else in the box, and a laptop. Couldn't be easier, could it? Really? I mean, it's just silly. And we just plonked it down. We didn't do any of the alignment stuff. We just plonked it down, and magically the signals were there. So we never moved the dish again. We didn't dare move the dish again. We just carried on for about an hour. And there's an actual shot of me. It was still chilly, as you can see. The waterproof jacket came in quite handy. But I was on my knees operating, trying to squint and see the laptop screen. You've all been there, I guess, trying to see what's on the screen in the bright sunshine. Now, that's a couple of other shots. Now, in theory...
Yeah. GW8TIX, GW8TIX. This is VO1/G3VZV portable. Thanks for the 5x9. You were 5x9. Signals are now dropping. There is slow QSB, but we proved. Thank you for proving that it does work. GW8TIX G3VZV portable, VO1/G3VZV portable, Signal Hill, over. Thank you. 7 3s. VO1/G3VZV portable, Signal Hill, QRZ, over.
What the locals thought of us as they were walking around doing their Saturday morning perambulation, I don't know. But there you go. So that was the end of our operation from Newfoundland, and I don't think anybody else has been back there since. I may be wrong. Not heard of any other operation. Anyway, quickly, lessons learnt and the thoughts for the future. We've said that the weather in mid-May can still be cold and damp. Gopan's mentioned, other people have mentioned, we noticed this QSB. Now, I don't think anybody has yet identified the cause for the QSB. Haven't really characterised it too carefully, too closely. Hasn't been monitored scientifically. My view is that it was about every 30 seconds and the signal would go up and down by about 30 dB. What that tells you, even if it's true, I don't know. I have a personal theory, it's not based on anything, but I wonder if it's signal rotation at the refraction point, and actually what we're seeing is vertical polarization becoming horizontal and backwards, and it's a polarization rotation that we're seeing, because it seemed to be sort of sine waving level. I don't know. We could prove that after the event. It's very easy. We could have proven that while we were there, because we had 2 LMBs and we could have turned one around through 90 degrees and said, well, is it going up and down at the same level, or is it out of phase? So there's still lots of discovery to be found there, investigations to be done. I've talked already about, is it better to be higher up or lower down? And the answer is probably either or both, depends, and the 30-second fading. The other fading thing, of course, is the possibility that the satellite is doing a 3-dimensional figure of 8, and are we actually seeing it just at the top? Again, we don't know. And the final one is the occasional peaks, bursts of signal. Again, hard to explain, not often noticed, but when we were flying back, I did take a screenshot of flight radar at the time. That was sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, but make sure I push the right button. Yeah, I think Newfoundland is just about there, and you've got all these aircraft at 30,000, 40,000 feet. And obviously the spacecraft is over here somewhere. Is it possible that some of the signals we were hearing were aircraft reflection? Again, don't know. Yeah, three-dimensional figure of 8. We didn't suffer, I don't think any of us suffered any equipment failure, which is really good. So we're quite proud of that. But we were careful to carry quite a lot of redundant backup equipment. I have to say, for the future, it'd be really, really good to have a beacon at Signal Hill, actually with a web SDR receiver as well, so you could really characterize what the path is like. The locals there were obviously concerned because it's difficult to get permission to put a big dish up, because it's a national monument, etc. Understand that, but even a small 35 centimetre, 40 centimetre dish hidden at the back of not at the back, but behind the parapet there. And of course the weather is diabolical and the winds are diabolical, so it would have to be very well built, but it would be a really tremendous asset to have. And again, I have to apologise for the lack of DATV. And the final sort of aside is you can never have too much gaffer tape in these sort of jobs, or cable ties, or hats or gloves. So for the future, should we go somewhere further? Sorry, we know that -1 will work. Thank you. Shall we go somewhere else for the future? Nearby, St. John's on this map is here. Nearby is a French département, Fox Papa something. Saint-Pierre and Miquelon. I can't pronounce the second word, but that's a nice off-lying island. Fairly easy to get to. You can fly to St. John and then drive down to the beach and get a ferry across. Shouldn't be terribly difficult. The weather, of course, is equally bad. So my final suggestion or offer or proposal or challenge is somewhere warmer, perhaps 8 Papa 6, Barbados. Does that sound more attractive? Yeah, okay. It's -4, which it's -4 degrees. 4 degrees below the horizon. So there you are. That's what we did. Hope I've 4 days in the 40 minutes or something. So thank you very much indeed. Happy to answer any questions, either to Gopan or myself. Yes. The question is, do we need a prize for the most Western QSO? Yeah, that sounds fun. Why not? So I'm just checking that AMSAT-UK will support that. Yeah, they will. Question there.
Just a question and a comment. The question was, did you point it direct? Did you use the Great Circle azimuth, or did you sort of go either side of it to find the satellite? And just secondly, just regarding the aircraft flutter, I think if it was bouncing off aircraft, you would hear some flutter, certainly on 2 gigs or whatever you're setting it up to.
Yeah.
As opposed to a change in polarization. I think that's
yeah. I think
just get the flutter from the aircraft more than anything.
Thank you. In terms of pointing angle, we used a. Oh, that's right. Yes, we used an Apple phone. So how does? Oh, yes, on the great. Yes, it was effectively a Great Circle. And in terms of the flutter and QSB and polarization, no, there were 2 separate effects. One was the very slow cyclical fading, and the other was just as a burst of signal. Now, I don't actually know aircraft reflection on microwaves. I hear it on 2 meters and 70 sems. Heard it on 23 sems. And it's sort of, well, it is flatter, isn't it? On 10 gigs, I'm not sure I've ever heard it, so I don't know what, well, I don't know. No. Okay, another question there. hang on. Let the microphone come as we have a microphone man. Thank you.
In terms of uplink power for phone comms, what was the sort of power ranges you were working to get successfully, into QO100? What sort of ranges were you at?
Yeah, I think when it was open, when it was working well, it was about the same as it would be operating here. So that very small dish, I had 10 watts probably at the dish, and that was more than enough. So that's the answer, really. Not a lot, nothing special.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Did the locals give any reason why they didn't use the beacon before? And a side question is the beacon still there or is been sent back?
Yeah, there was issues of people moving house and not having the equipment available. I think their main difficulty was to find somewhere to locate it on a permanent basis, and their whatever, I can't think of the name of the organisation that protects their environment. Say again? Parks Canada, thank you, Ian. Parks Canada were not playing ball with anything. The ideal would be to find somewhere like Gopan operated from, a chap in a house or somebody who owns a house on the beach, and let somebody do what you were doing for an extended period of time. And I suspect they got this 1 metre dish, and so for them they had to use this 1 metre dish, and probably that led them down a path that made it more difficult than it need be. Okay, thank you. Oh, last question. Okay, that's a very, very timely question. I'm now going to say thank you very much indeed for listening to me again, and hand the microphone back to Dave.
Thank you, Graham. It's fantastic. Must you have fun, and definitely technical challenges all around. Gopan, you received a certificate in my little bag here. Hold the microphone a second. Thank you. This is on behalf of AMSAT-UK, and it's the AMSAT North America Challenge Cup, awarded to Ravi Gopan M0XUU for making the first two-way contact via QO100 on the 11th of May 2024. Congratulations. And ladies and gentlemen, we are now having a 15-minute break until, excuse me, 11:45, and David Berman, G0MRF, will be coming back to talk about FunCube Lite on the Jovian 1 satellite. Thank you very much indeed.